I think JD can't avoid forever taking a stand.
Trump recently claimed on social media that his party has never been so united as it is right now. But is that correct? We've talked on the show before about splits in the MAGA movement over the Jeffrey Epstein saga. But there's also the growth of a far-right movement called the Groypers, led by a 26-year-old college dropout called Nick Fuentes, who streams his views online. Well, Rod Dreher is a conservative writer, author of books about politics and religion. He's been on the show before, but today he's in London, and now he's here in the studio. Rod, hello.
Hugo, thank you for having me.
It's lovely to have you back on the show and lovely to have you here in person. Let's get right into this. Donald Trump, he looks unassailable at the moment, but he won't be in the White House forever. Is it inevitable that cracks begin to appear in his base?
Yeah, absolutely, because so much of what Trump has built is built around a cult of personality. And I don't say that so much as a criticism, but just as a fact. And he's already starting to see people turn against him. Marjorie Taylor Greene, who was one of his most stalwart MAGA supporters in Congress, she's now denouncing him and has dropped out of her next congressional race. And as you say, the Groyper issue, the anti-Semitism, the racism and all that comes out of Nick Fuentes and his movement is going to be a serious problem for J.D. Vance going forward.
Well, so you're a long-term friend and indeed advocate of J.D. Vance from before he was as politically active as he is now. He's tipped to be Trump's heir on the Republican ticket in 2028. What does he think about all this? Does he regard himself as a unifying figure, or does he regard this coalition as having problems?
It's hard to say. I did see him very briefly on a recent trip to Washington, in which I said that I really hope you will come out and denounce the Groypers because they stand to destroy everything that we all believe in. He kept his own counsel. It was a very brief meeting, but in 2024, he gave an interview in which he completely condemned Nick Fuentes. What I don't understand right now in American politics is where he stands vis-a-vis the Groypers. He used to hate them, but he did not. He has a decision to make here. Tucker Carlson, his great friend and advisor, the guy who's probably most responsible for Donald Trump picking him as vice president, had Nick Fuentes on his very popular chat show or interview show and gave him a very, very soft interview. And I found that incredibly disturbing because it served to mainstream this fringe loony. I think J.D. can't avoid forever taking a stand.
Let's talk a bit about Fuentes and the Groypers. Who is he? Who are they? What do they think?
Nick Fuentes is, as you said, a college dropout, 27 years old. He's made a name for himself with a nightly live stream show in which he denies the Holocaust, says things like Hitler is effing cool. He said that women want to be raped. I mean, just a horrible, horrible man. But he's developed a somewhat large following among young, dispossessed white men who have some legitimate grievances. They feel dispossessed. They feel like they can't get a house. They don't have any place in life. And wokeness has denounced them or has posed them as the problem to all of society. So he didn't come from nowhere. However, he is stoking their rage and making neo-Nazism, anti-Semitism, and racism more normal in the Republican Party. I think J.D. Vance is the only one with the moral authority and the background as having grown up poor and from a broken family. He could stop this if he chooses to. But if he doesn't, my fear is that these people, their influence will only continue to grow.
Whose fault is it that they've become so influential already? Because, I mean, one could argue that members of the sort of more mainstream members of the MAGA coalition, if we're going to call them that, have turned at best a sort of a blind eye to this sort of thing. We've had Donald Trump's championship of people like Andrew Tate, for example, who's not that different from Fuentes politically. Even J.D. Vance himself has been slow to condemn people like this. Yeah. Does mainstream MAGA bear a pretty sort of bleak responsibility for allowing this stuff to fester?
I think they bear some responsibility, but in all honesty, Hugo, I think this is primarily a reaction to the great awakening, to the woke left. You have to imagine that these young men who follow Fuentes and those who are in that line of thinking, they grew up in a world in which they were told that to be white and male is to be the source of all evil in the world. And I'm only slightly overstating it. And they feel resentful, and they have a right to be resentful.
But resentful of who? They've got a white male as president who presides over an administration that is largely dominated by white males.
No, and please understand,
they should be in clover today.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, they have grown up in a world in which all the institutions, or most of the institutions, which accepted wokeness, have been turned against them, and the normal Republican Party didn't stand up for them. You're right that Trump today, the Trump that got elected in 2024, has come out hard against wokeness. But it's something beyond mere politics. We have this huge problem in the U.S. that I think you have in the U.K. too, of a gender gap. Young men and young women are not partnering. They're not starting families. And look, we saw all of this in Weimar, Germany in the 1920s. And I'm afraid that we're playing out all over the West the same script. Again, I'm not defending Nick Fuentes, but we will never stop him and the actual racist, neo-Nazi anti-Semites unless we understand what their grievances are, which ones are legitimate and which ones are scurrilous.
Why could Vance be the answer to this? Because he's a married man in a mixed race relationship, but he's also he's a devout Christian. He's a Catholic. What is it about him that could help heal these rifts?
I think, first of all, we know from his biography that he grew up in a broken family and some working class family in Appalachia. He's 41 years old, which means he doesn't carry with him the sort of Reagan idealism that older Republicans do. And he also went through the U.S. Marine Corps. He has military service behind him. He served in Iraq, and he saw what a fraud the Iraq War was, a war that was pushed by the establishment Republican Party. I think he, based on his personal experience and his age, I think he really does have the moral standing to put these people in their place. And the fact that he's married to Usha, who comes from an Indian ethnic background, he shows by the life he lives that these people are wrong. But I don't know if he's going to be able to take them on. I think he ultimately will, because he won't have a chance to avoid it forever. But I can't think of any other figure who has the power he does. Not even Trump, who's a boomer, and the young men really don't listen to him.
J.D. Vance, he seems to have mixed views about the UK. He's talked about being an Islamist country that hasn't done enough to protect basic liberties, but he was also very nice about it when he came here on holiday in the summer. You're here this week. You posted a picture of Westminster Abbey this morning. You wrote, "A civilization if you can keep it." What did you mean?
What I meant by that is, here in the UK, as someone who is an Anglophile, it really, really worries me what's happening in this country with the seeming inability or unwillingness of the establishment to take on radical Islam, to control the borders, and to address the housing crisis that I think will ultimately radicalize young men, and maybe not only men. I live in Hungary, as you know, and we can see the same thing happening all across Europe. I followed David Betts, the professor at King's College London in the War Studies Department. He has warned that all of the countries of the West, in particular Britain and France, are meeting the conditions for civil war. And how can you not be concerned about this sort of thing?
Explain to me what you mean about the government failing to take, or the state failing to take on radical Islam, because it seems to me that 10 years ago, 15 years ago, there was a real threat from radical Islam in this country, as there was in the United States in the wake of 9/11, in the wake of 7/7. There was, sort of a huge terrorist problem. That doesn't seem to be the case today. Precisely what are you worried about?
Well, I'm worried about Islam in a more cultural and political sense. For example, we saw what happened when the fans of the Tel Aviv football club, could not go to the stadium because they were in too much danger. It seems to me, looking from the outside, that far too often the authorities in this country defer to Islam. We think of the Pakistani rape gangs. I mean, that is a scandal. It should never have happened. And I think the main reason it happened is the authorities across political parties are afraid of the political and cultural power, growing power of Islam in this country.
When you talk about this in the context of losing Westminster Abbey, losing the civilization behind Westminster Abbey, aren't you doing what the Groypers do? Aren't you talking up this idea of an existential clash in which you've got to be on the right side, where you've got to fight, all that kind of stuff? I mean, this is exactly their playbook, isn't it?
No, it's not. No, I don't think so at all. It can't be the case. If you say that to care about Western civilization and the things that it built, the abbeys, the cathedrals, the castles, and the culture that came out of the West, if the only way to defend these things from challenges to them is to side with the fascists and the neo-Nazis, then you are going to get neo-Nazis and fascists.
But do you really think we're in danger of losing Westminster Abbey?
Well, what do you mean by losing?
Well, I don't know, it turning into a mosque.
Yeah, well, I doubt very much it will turn into a mosque, but I think Westminster Abbey is a symbol of the enduring Christian culture here in Britain and across Europe, and that is certainly going away. This is a very secular country now, but if you don't defend it, you will lose it.
Rod, look, we've got to leave it there. I haven't asked you nearly half the stuff I wanted to. It was a great pleasure having you here. I hope you'll come back. Rod Dreher, thank you very much indeed.